Welcome to Lessons in Leadership with me, Steve Adubato, and my colleague, Mary Gamba. The programming that you're about to see was taped earlier this year. Clearly, so much has changed since then, and unfortunately, a lot of uncertainty and fear remain. However, the issues and the topics raised in this edition of Lessons in Leadership will still matter once we get through these very challenging and difficult times. So without further ado, Lessons in Leadership. Welcome to Lessons in Leadership. I'm Steve Adubato. I'm here with my colleague, Mary Gamba. How are you doing, Mary?
Doing great today, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing great. We're going to talk a lot right out of the box about leading in challenging times. Some people call it a crisis, but it's in the eye of the beholder, whether you call it a crisis or a challenging time or whatever it is. But we're going to be talking to our longtime colleague and friend, Bob Garrett, from Hackensack Meridian Health in just a minute. Mary, do us a favor, let folks know who the sponsors of the show are.
We have some great sponsors. We've got Prager Metis. We also have Gibbons Law Firm, New Jersey Resources, Valley Bank, and the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 825.
And by the way, you're watching us on News 12 Plus, listening on AM 970, and a whole range of other outlets, including?
Including NJBIA, NJ.com, Best of NJ. You can also subscribe to the podcast at Apple Podcast as well as on Google Play.
Here we go. So listen, we're taping this program on the 9th of March. You don't need me to tell you that as we do this program, and you'll see it after that there's been tremendous concern, anxiety, nervousness, fear around the coronavirus. We hope that when this program airs in a couple of weeks, it will not be as severe, but we don't know. But I'll tell you what, and I just said this before to Mary, whether it's this particular situation or the SARS situation before that or the Ebola situation, public health challenges really challenge leaders. And on the line right now is Bob Garrett, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Hackensack Meridian Health. Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Good to be with you guys.
Bob, do us a favor. Let folks know exactly what the footprint of Hackensack Meridian Health is.
Sure, Steve. Hackensack Meridian Health today is a 17-hospital health network. We have 500 patient care locations, and that ranges from physicians' offices to surgery centers, urgent care centers, assisted living, fitness centers, as well as a vast post-acute care network, including nursing homes, rehab centers, and subacute care centers. So it's an extensive healthcare network that's really located throughout the state of New Jersey. We have 36,000 team members, 7,000 affiliated physicians that are working with Hackensack Meridian.
And to that end, let me disclose that I've done a significant amount of leadership and communication coaching within the network. We actually, I'm teaching in a physician leadership academy there as well. And really it brings us to this point. So, Bob, there was an article in ROI, correct, Mary, by Tom Bergeron?
Yes.
In ROI, that really talked significantly about the kind of communication that Bob has been involved in as it relates to the coronavirus. Bob, let me ask you this. Whether it's the coronavirus or fast forward could be any situation, we're hoping and praying nothing else gets worse, but how do you prepare and how have you prepared for a crisis when you don't know exactly how it's going to play out or when it's going to hit?
Well, I think there's certain fundamentals, and in the healthcare industry, there's been, a series of crises historically, and as you said, whether it's the coronavirus or it might have been SARS or Ebola before it, or in the case of Hackensack Meridian, we were hit with a ransomware cybersecurity attack just a couple of months ago. There's certain fundamentals. I mean, you have to prepare the organization. You have to practice. You have to drill for different scenarios that are out there. You have to educate your workforce, and then you have to have a really solid communication plan that really is proactive and is timely is accurate. And some people say, well, sometimes you might be overkilling communications. I don't believe that. I think particularly in challenging times, in times of crisis, people are looking for accurate information. They're looking for timely information, and I'd rather be accused of practicing overkill than not communicating enough. And you can allay some of those fears that you were referring to earlier.
So it's interesting, Bob. To what degree do you, as the leader, the CEO of the organization, feel that it's so interesting, this question about who is one thing is what's the message, the other question is who's the messenger, and obviously on the national level, that issue is being played out. President Trump is speaking a lot about this. Leaders at the Centers for Disease Control are speaking a lot about this. There are clinicians and non-clinicians. You're a non-clinician, but you're the CEO of this very large healthcare network. Do you feel it should be you or someone else with a clinical background who's, quote, actually communicating?
It's actually the answer to the question is it's both. So I think it's very important that the CEO, the leader of an organization, really speaks for that organization. Many times I've referred to myself as the chief mission officer because, it's important that the mission of the organization always is in the forefront, and that it's communicated over and over. In our case, it's about care transformation. So I think it's important whether it's a time of crisis or just in everyday communication. Having said that, though, it's important that you make sure that subject matter experts also weigh in and communicate regularly. So in our case, we've had daily communications, not just from me in terms of the overall situation, but also from our chief medical executive for the Hackensack Meridian Network, as well as our chief of infection control and infection prevention, because they are the subject matter experts when it comes to this coronavirus communication. Now, when we were communicating about the ransomware, about the cybersecurity attack, we had others like our chief of information technology as one of our key spokespeople. So I think it's important that people hear from the leader, the CEO in this case, because there's probably nobody like the leader that can at least reassure people that we're managing the crisis, that we're covering all the contingencies. But it's also important to recognize that the CEO is not always the subject matter expert, and therefore you got to bring in the appropriate people, the appropriate clinical people, the appropriate scientists, the technicians, depending on what the situation calls for.
You're listening to Bob Garrett, who is the CEO of Hackensack Meridian Health. This is Steve Adubato and my co-host Mary Gamba in the studio here. This is Lessons in Leadership. We're here at East Main Media Studios. Bob, let me try this one on you. So, again, we've talked a lot about leadership offline as well. And one of the keys in a crisis is for a leader, for he or she, to stay calm. Let me ask you this question, because people are watching you. People are playing off your cues. And I will say, it's so interesting. We're talking about real challenging situations. Mary has been very critical of me, appropriately so at times, when things have gone wrong, say in the studio, and I haven't handled that well, and I overreact, and it makes things worse.
Absolutely, it makes things worse.
Exactly. So, Bob, here's my question. In a real crisis or a real situation, how do you, there's no other way to say this, quote, manage your emotions?
Yeah, I think it is important that you're as a leader, you're in a fishbowl. Honestly, Steve, whether you're in your office environment, or in my case, if you're out amongst our physicians at the hospitals, it is incredibly important to stay calm, to stay cool and collective, as well as very focused. So last week, as an example, when this coronavirus crisis became more acute and it really looked like there was going to be more community spread, I was out there. I rounded at 6 different hospitals last week. I was very visible. people saw me, interacting with our various team members in a very, very calm way. But, I attended some safety huddles where the coronavirus was talked about. We spoke about it, was very transparent about the fact that we did have a patient at one of our hospitals that was under care, and gave the team a little bit of an update about that, even though I was at another hospital at the time, not the hospital that the patient was at. I think that visibility and calmness, during a crisis is so important. And even in the communication, it's very, our communications are very factual. They're very calm. They're soothing, if you will, because I think people get reassured when they hear how the team is doing. And I never pass up an opportunity to compliment our team as well, because these folks are on the front lines and they're saving lives each and every day. But they're still right on the front lines there, and it's something that I would never take for granted.
By the way, let's remind folks, we are in fact taping this interview about crisis leadership, if you will, with Bob on the 9th of March. I want to be really, really clear. If you want to get day-to-day news as to what's going on, our partners and friends over at NJTV News do a great job of that, or News 12 Plus. You can check them out as well at News 12, their operation, and a whole range of other news platforms. This is not a news program. It is a program about leadership to help leaders be the best they can be under challenging circumstances. Bob, last question before we let you go, because I know you're dealing with a whole range of issues. I'm a big fan of what I like to call, quote, disciplined communication. And Bob's a football fan. He's a fan of the New York Football Giants, if you will. And so, Bob, here's the connection. I often say it's important to communicate, I'm doing this on camera, within the goalpost. What I mean by that is your main message, the things you need to get across, have to be within the goalpost. Stay disciplined, stay focused, Mary Gamba, right? And when you start getting outside the goalpost and saying things that you're not sure about, that you really shouldn't be getting into, things that are incorrect, it's dangerous. How do you, trust me, there's a question here, Bob, how do you stay inside the goalpost?
I think you're absolutely right about staying inside the goalposts as being real important. I think your message needs to be relatively short, needs to be concise and focused and factual. And we do a lot of fact checking before communications go out. And the other piece is, I said it before, but bring in the subject matter experts. If you're not sure about a fact, don't put it out there in the communication. Make sure that your subject matter expert can comment on it. Honestly, before we had our cybersecurity attack, I didn't know every aspect of our cybersecurity protection system, but I did bring in the appropriate people as part of our communication, as part of our leadership plan to address those kinds of specific issues. And by the way, one thing in leadership in terms of being a secure leader and a mature leader is sometimes admitting you don't know.
That's right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Saying I just don't know. If somebody asks a question, I'm at a town hall meeting and I don't know the answer, I'm not going to try to guess at it. I'm going to bring in the appropriate people, or if I don't have that person there, I will often say I will get back to you with the correct information, and we do.
To Bob's point, that is what I mean by being disciplined, Mary. If you don't know, actually trying to answer a question in a public forum in the media that you don't know the answer to, you're going outside the goalpost, and then you're going to try to put the genie back in the bottle, say you were taken out of context. That's dangerous stuff. So, Bob, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us about leading and communicating in very challenging times. Thank you, Bob. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Good stuff. Mary, let's go to a break right now. We'll be right back after this talking more about communicating and leading in very challenging times. This is Lessons in Leadership. I'm Steve. That's Mary. We'll be right back.
This is Mary Gamba. If you want more leadership tips and tools, log on to stand-deliver.com. That's stand-deliver.com.
This edition of Lessons in Leadership is brought to you by Gibbons PC, Prager Metis, Valley Bank, New Jersey Resources, and the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 825. Welcome back to Lessons in Leadership with Steve Adubato and my colleague, Mary Gamba. Quick reaction, Mary, to Bob Garrett's comments?
It's fascinating hearing a leader talk about in real time when there's a crisis happening. Some of the key things that I was jotting down were educate, be visible. You don't need to be the smartest person in that room, and that's really what I took away from it. Most leaders, they think, hey, if there's a crisis, I need to be in there and I need to have all the facts. And Bob really hit it on the head that you don't need to have all the facts in those types of situations. You need to know who to go to get those facts, and if you don't, they're not in that room, you let the people know, hey, listen, I don't have that answer. I'll get back to you at a later time.
You know, again, this really brings up a fascinating question. We're taping on the 9th, of March. It'll be seen after that. It'll be heard after that. Take your politics, your political views, your ideology, try to put it aside for a second, all right? But I often study and think about President Trump, or any president. I've been doing a lot of research around presidential leadership. There's a really wonderful book that C-SPAN put out. Mary, Google the name of that.
I think it's just called The Presidents.
I think it's called The Presidents,
It is,
put out
yeah.
by C-SPAN. And they had all these different presidential historians, Doris Kearns Goodwin, who wrote about the Roosevelts, a whole range of other people, Doug Brinkley, a great presidential historian. The reason I mention it is because I'm a student of presidential leadership. What does it have to do with this? Well, whether it's FDR or John F. Kennedy or Lyndon Johnson or Abraham Lincoln, they all faced one crisis or another, right? So what struck me, and what is worth putting on the table, is for President Trump, I think it's very challenging. And again, we're taping on the 9th of March. Go back to the beginning. People want to be optimistic. You want to be positive. You don't want to scare people. A really important part of leadership. But is there also a risk for a leader in a crisis of downplaying, minimizing, and also potentially blaming others? I remember the president blamed on the media, the quote Democrats. Again, forget your politics. And also was saying that it's a very limited situation, it's not going to spread, and the vaccine's coming in a couple months. My only question is this: can a leader make the mistake of being overly optimistic in a situation like this?
It's a balancing act. You don't want to give the public a false sense of security by saying that everything's going to be okay. On the flip side, you don't want him running around with his arms up in the air and saying the sky is falling. Nothing good is going to come of that either. What Bob Garrett had said, the CEO of Hackensack Meridian Health, who you just had on, is educate. Get the information, be factual, but be concise.
What if you don't know? See, but in a very public press conference, sorry for interrupting.
Yeah.
In a very public press conference, when the president said that a vaccine for this particular virus, and again, this is really not about the coronavirus, it's about leadership in challenging times. When the president said that the vaccine would be available in a few months and on the outside a year or whatever, something like that, Anthony Fauci, who at the time we're taping this is a top infectious disease expert, had to publicly correct the president and say it was more like a year and a half to be optimistic.
Ouch. Ouch. It's hard. He had to do that, and you and I have talked about this offline.
Dr. Fauci?
He had to. There are millions and millions of people tuned in, waiting to hear the latest fact. Every day I wake up, I take a look at Facebook to see the new cases or Twitter. And he needed to jump in, but there has to be a nuance. There has to be a delivery. So it doesn't make it seem like, oh, President, no, you're not right with that. It's, oh, let me just clarify for those listening that this is exactly what you mean, right? It's all in how you nuance it. It's how you phrase it. So this way you're not necessarily putting down the person or saying, but you just want to make sure that you're giving the most accurate information.
This is an interesting question because Mary and I talk about this a lot. Now, again, I'm the leader of our small organization. Brian's the leader here at East Main Media. People watching, listening right now, there are different kinds of leaders in all kinds of situations. And it's not so much just about crisis communication, but I am curious about this. Should someone on a leader's team correct publicly the leader when he or she says something that's simply not true, or do you let it go and talk privately
if the stakes are high, and especially in that case, I believe that was live, right?
It was live.
That was live. In that situation where everybody is taken down, everyone's terrified. It's something new. It's something we don't know, and we want to get information. In that situation, and it is by a case-by-case basis, you do need to interrupt and correct and be factual, because that information is then going to be disseminated in so many other ways. So if you don't fix it right then and there, but in some other situations, sure. We've had times where later on we'll go back and say, oh, Steve, you could have handled this differently, or Mary, why didn't you handle it this way with this person? But in that situation, when you're talking about facts, you need to get it straight up right at the time.
What about if the leader says, Brian, Mary, if the leader says, don't correct me in public? I'm not saying the president said that. I don't know that, but go ahead.
Well,
I'm sure he didn't like it all that much.
In the case of a public health situation,
is that different?
Let's turn the question around a little bit. I mean, should Fauci have sort of said, hey, look, step aside, let me clear the record? I think he did it politely.
Go ahead.
But in the case of our president, people often criticize him that he's dealing with his insecurities, or he has his own psychology of why he's doing these things and his ego. Also, people have commented of, well, why don't more people correct misstatements, right? And this is, again, not being political, but about President Trump. In the case of what we're talking about with a public health emergency, I think the other issue is about trust. So if we've already eroded the trust between leaders, any leader.
Any leader
right?
in any situation.
So that's really what I think the issue is. And so if you're posing the question of, well, should someone step up and say, hey, hold on, let me set the record straight. This is what needs to be known. I think in this case with public health emergency, I mean, we're seeing it evolve hour by hour.
Okay, again, I want to clarify, though.
Yeah.
We are not, the Lessons in Leadership is not a program about where are we with the coronavirus. Go to News 12 Plus, go to NJTV News, go to NJ.com, go to news sources day to day that are monitoring this. But I will say, I do think that it's appropriate. And by the way, it's interesting. We keep talking about leadership. Dr. Fauci was a leader. He led by stepping up and clarifying publicly, because that was courageous.
Oh, absolutely. And also, too, you need to realize we need to take a step back. If you're a CEO of a company and you're going in to talk to your team in an important board meeting, you need to have the facts going in, and you talked about the goalposts. You need to know what is and is not okay to say as the CEO of that company or as the leader of the free world.
And if you're not sure?
And if you're not sure, don't say it.
Just don't say it.
Go whether or not to say something to somebody that says something. As if you're a really effective leader, you're going to know what to say and what not to say.
And to what Bob Garrett said, he's not afraid of saying, hey, look, this is not my expertise.
Right.
Let me get the expert on this.
Right.
That's what's so interesting about that Brian just said? I'm fascinated by this, because I asked Bob a question about how you manage your emotions. The other thing is managing your ego, right? And again, one of the things that fascinates me about leadership is that people say, oh, you have to have the confidence to handle a crisis and get out front and be the man or the woman out front. Really? Is that what confidence means? How about having the confidence to say, I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm going to gather people around me who are much smarter than I am about this thing. And again, could be any situation. Bob Garrett was talking about this cybersecurity situation, cyber attack. Why would a CEO be the expert on cybersecurity? Why would the CEO be an expert on infectious disease? He or she needs to be the best leader and manager of the organization.
And he needs to know who is the best expert. He or she needs to know, who do I go to for this answer? That is being a good leader, not going out there and talking about things you don't know about. So
yeah, I'm not a fan of saying I'm the smartest. I know more than the generals. I know more than the doctors. I know more. It just never strikes me as confident. It's something else. But again, as I said, my degree is not in psychology, right?
maybe one day it will be.
No, but you have a background in psychology.
I do. That's what my degree is in, and I use it every day. It's great.
What's the connection between psychology and leadership?
Everything has to do, here we go. What do we got?
Could we get
Emotional intelligence.
Dr. Daniel Goleman,
Dr.
author of the
Daniel
book
Goleman.
Emotional Intelligence. What is the connection between crisis leadership and emotional intelligence?
It's all human beings. We deal with human beings on a daily basis, over the phone, in person, and whether you're talking in a crisis, in good times or in bad, psychology and getting into understanding the human nature and how people react to the good and the bad, that's how you're going to be a success, and being able to manage and do all that.
Okay. Shift gears. What do we got? About 5 minutes left. So, Mary, can we do this? Let's go to our greatest leadership quotes of all time. Okay. So, set this up, Mary. Where do these quotes come from so people don't think they're just,
they're not. We wrote all 100 of them, Steve.
There's 100 best leadership quotes of all time. They do not come from Mary and Steve.
I know. Although some of them, I swear we live and breathe by them. But article on Inc.com was this article by Lolly Daskell, the president and CEO of Lead From Within.
Go ahead.
And there were just so many great quotes. And throughout the series, we've been really talking about really the quotes that resonated with us. I loved When People Talk, Listen Completely. Number 14, if you're following along, Ernest Hemingway. When people talk, listen completely.
Go ahead.
You and I often talk and we joke about it. It's once you say, sorry for interrupting. Once you say that, maybe you shouldn't have interrupted if you're sorry. Now, sometimes you have to. What we do in television, things are timed. You need to really make sure to keep it flowing and moving. But sometimes you need to be truly present and listen and not be thinking about what you're going to say next. I am the worst at that. I'm always thinking about what I want to say. I always want to be prepared. And I've been trying to practice being more thoughtful while someone is speaking and actually listening to what they are saying.
I'm sorry, you finished. I don't want to interrupt
I'm done. Go ahead. Good job. I noticed. I was seeing how long I could go, and then I gave you a pass.
Did that look like I was listening?
Yeah. What's your next number?
So how about this one? This is interesting. This is from David Starr Jordan. I don't even know who that is. Number 23. Wisdom is knowing what to do next. Skill is knowing how to do it. Virtue is doing it.
What does that mean to you?
I have no idea.
I wondered because I read that one and almost circled it, and I didn't really know what he was saying.
Do you know why
so then I moved on. Why?
Because I thought you might be able to tell me what it meant.
No, that one didn't really work for me.
Okay, I'm sorry. Hold on one second. Okay, I got it. Number 16.
Okay, you go.
Ready? Mm-hmm. Number 16. It doesn't matter what number it is. Not like you have the list at home. Andrew's sitting there going, why Steve giving the number? Okay, here it is. One of the tests of leadership is the ability to recognize a problem before it becomes an emergency. See, this one's huge.
Huge.
Go ahead.
Huge. We talk about that, especially in business. It's so important. A true leader is able to see things, feel things, predict things, and see trends, a pattern, if you will. And so this way it doesn't become a major problem. You could kind of nip it in the bud a lot sooner. So that's a good one. Connecting the dots.
Yeah. I mean.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
I'm big on that one. But where's the other one about office hours? Oh, here it is.
Oh.
This is from Cardinal Gibbons. There are no office hours for leaders. Again, we've touched on this before. Mm-hmm. And we talked about this with Kika Wise, we did a separate lessons in leadership with Kika. She runs a great stretching studio, and she has a franchise of, I think, 11?
Yeah,
11
she's
all
like
around the
11
country.
all around the country.
But she's always thinking. You're always thinking. I'm always thinking. Brian's always thinking. Do you think it takes a certain kind of person? There are no office hours for leaders. Do you think there's only a certain group of us? And I'm not trying to be an elitist here, but I
do. I think there's a certain group of people that are constantly looking to strive, to learn, to grow. And there's other people that are doers, and we've talked about this before, but they go to work 9 to 5, they punch the clock, they get home, and then it's all done. They don't want to think about it until they get to work the next day.
Anything wrong with that?
No, I think to each their own. I mean, the beauty of, living life is everybody can do what they want to do. And if it works for a certain person, it's not me, it's not you, then I think that's okay.
I'm torn on this. Got a minute left. I don't want to open up this massive leadership Pandora's box, but I actually don't think it's okay, and I'll tell you why. Because in this day and age, with the level of uncertainty, the level of competition, the level of innovation that is necessary to stay relevant, if organizations only count on certain people to be the ones to come up with ideas, to stay ahead of the trends, to be innovative, and a significant number of people on the team, they're just going to do their job every day and go home at 5 or a little before we know who you are. That doesn't work. Sorry. And I'm not saying everyone has to be as committed or
True.
obsessed as some of us, but
True.
come on, really? I'm just going to do my job and go home?
Certain jobs, though, I mean, certain jobs you can be done at 5 o'clock and just go home. There are certain jobs that you can. And
In
again,
a dynamic, successful company?
well, I guess we're talking different types of professions, but sure, I do think that there is a place for those types of people. You and I have agreed to disagree on that. We could talk about that in another 10 years, but.
And you know what? Brian's going like this.
I know.
Brian Brodeur.
That's going to be our universal
got
signal.
that?
We'll just do this from now on when we're done.
Okay, Steve Adubato, Mary Gamba, this has been another great edition of Lessons in Leadership. I want to thank all of our sponsors and also the folks who carry us all around on the digital platforms as well as on AM 970 and also at News 12 Plus. Thank you for watching us. Lessons in Leadership, Steve Adubato, Mary Gamba. We'll be back next week, same time, same bat channel. God, that was corny.
That was so bad. This is Mary Gamba. If you want more leadership tips and tools, log on to stand-deliver.com. That's stand-deliver.com.
This edition of Lessons in Leadership is brought to you by Gibbons PC, Prager Metis, Valley Bank, New Jersey Resources, and the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 825.